Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Mia Nosanow, author of the new book, The College Student's Guide to Mental Health, Essential Wellness Strategies for Flourishing in College. We talk about what led her to write this book, how long it took from beginning to end, and some of the challenges facing college students and adolescents on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Mia, this week's Who the Folk podcast is sponsored by Hodroff Epstein Memorial Chapels. Established more than 90 years ago, Hodroff Epstein is family-owned and operated with locations in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The staff has years of experience caring for families of all walks of life. Families choose Hodroff Epstein because of a dedication to service, integrity, and serving the needs of their clients. For more information, go to hodroffepsteinmemorialchapels.com. And this week's podcast is also brought to you by TC Jewfolk's Minnesota Mamala's Stories from the Tribe on June 24th at Bethel Synagogue. Stories from the Tribe is a live, on-stage summer show featuring 12 true and original stories somehow threaded to being or having a mamala. The good, the bad, the golden, and the hilarious. Tickets are on sale now. You can get them at bit.ly/mamalas. That's bit.ly/MAMMALEHS. Mia Nosanow, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited to talk to you today. You are the author of the relatively new book, The College Student's Guide to Mental Health, Essential Wellness Strategies for Flourishing in College. Before we get into the book itself, I guess for starters, why don't you give us an idea of your background that makes you sort of the right person to take on this topic of a book?
Well, what led me to the book was I worked for 20 years as a mental health counselor at McAllister College in St. Paul. And I just worked as a counselor. I didn't run a department or anything. So I was in the trenches for 20 years and I just had a lot of experience with students. And I kept seeing these themes over and over again that to me weren't mental illness, they were mental health. They were the really normal struggles that students go through, that I thought it would be really nice if they could be sort of laid out in a book form so that not everybody had to go to counseling center to understand that these were issues that everyone or most people are facing most of these issues. How does that sound?
No, that sounds great. You said it's not mental illness, it's mental health or mental wellness. What's the line? What delineates?
I'm sure there's not a hard line, but
I'm sure there's not too.
Yeah, this is one of those fields where there's a lot of shades of gray. But basically, mental health, I would say it's similar to physical health, where you're feeling pretty good, you can get through your day, you're working on stuff because we all have issues, but you're not diagnosed with anything serious. So it's kind of, I mean, I don't even like that description because a lot of us are working on our health and we may have a diagnosis of something, but it doesn't mean we're not healthy.
Right.
So there's the healthy, striving to be healthy. You may have some kind of diagnosis, but instead of just labeling everything like an illness and working from that point of view, I wanted to sort of highlight that we can all work on healthy stuff, have strategies to be healthier, that they're readily available. They're not like these outlandish things. They're sort of really super practical ideas, just like to be physically healthy. You want to do some exercise. The same is for mental health.
Yeah.
You want to move, whatever way works for you. So they're sort of similar.
It feels like, at least one of my takeaways from what you said there, that if you say you're working, if it gets labeled as an illness right away, it feels like you're working from a position of weakness rather than a position of strength and trying to overcome it. Like you're playing to a diagnosis or to a label as opposed to, you know, working in it from a different place in that.
That sounds right to me too. I mean, I am actually a big fan of getting a proper diagnosis for something and treating it. So, but this coexists with that
Right.
to where like we can all work on the kind of prevention and the just everyday skills for living that all of us deserve to have.
Absolutely. And I think there's a difference between a proper diagnosis and or a more up-to-date diagnosis rather than just a um you know consulting Dr. Google, for example,
Yeah.
of these are the things I'm feeling, what is wrong with me? And
Yeah.
again, wrong is not necessarily the proper term there either,
Right.
but I'll
Right.
acknowledge.
Exactly. And something that makes college the age of college students kind of special is that it is a great time of transition
Mm.
and sort of healthy struggle to figure stuff out. It's super normal and expected for folks not to know what they want or really totally who they are yet when they're in that college age and what works for you, you know? So all those things are supposed to be there. They're not the sign of a true huge problem. Like if you're feeling sad because of XYZ, it might be like the healthiest thing for you to be feeling that, you know, like I don't know what I like yet, you know, or worried about something. It doesn't mean you have depression. It means you're working through something that is legitimately a challenge.
No, absolutely. And I think the interesting with being at a college, whether it's just Macalester or in your case, or having spent 20 years at a number of colleges, it's the sort of age in which you're seeing these students. 20 years is sort of I guess, nominally a generation,
Hmm.
roughly. And
Yeah.
so you have, you're seeing these students over the course of time where like the students and the surroundings, the outside, trappings outside of school are evolve greatly, whether
Yeah.
it's social media, whether it's just anything that they're dealing with on a given day is going to be a very different experience from, you know, throughout your tenure.
Absolutely. There's a lot of really big things that happened in my tenure that I believe impacted mental health. I started working at Mac in 2001, and my third day at work was 9/11.
Oh, sure.
And that affected not immediately mental health, but I think it did. And then the 2008 financial crisis,
Mm-hmm.
um, the advent of the iPhone and the advent of Facebook and all the social media. And for a lot of students, the election of Trump was really hard on their mental health. And then last but not least, the pandemic
Yep.
was, of course, but I was basically working the generation of the millennials in college, and they brought a lot of struggle that hadn't been seen quite like that before. And Gen Z, I think, is struggling as well with mental health. So
I
it's
think you mentioned
real.
it is real. And you mentioned the pandemic, and my kids are now 19 and 15. And I've talked to a number of people who sort of range the age from like my youngest and maybe a little bit younger to 21, 22ish year olds. And I think everybody thinks that they had it worse, the worst in the pandemic, but I think like
Yeah.
every age had they all had it bad. I mean, this is not the oppression Olympics, right? Everybody had it bad, but
Right.
for different reasons,
Hmm.
and because everybody's in a different stage as they're going through that.
Right. I mean, I think I mean, children and young adults, I would say probably, and people that were caring for children and young adults. So that takes a lot, big swath
Yeah.
right there. I think there were some groups that weren't as poorly impacted as people who are like actively developing and growing, that was really hard on them.
Yeah. No question. So let's go back. So we'll go back now. Let's get into the book a little bit. The book
Okay.
is, I think it's really neatly divided into sort of six different what you call parts in this book, which the number of chapters in each part. And the parts are your body, your identity, your thoughts, your emotions, your relationships, and your time. And then there's some appendices as well. But I'm curious, when you were putting the book together, what was it that led you to structure it in this particular way?
It took me so long to figure out how to structure it. It was not easy, but I did end up starting with the section on your body because my kind of joking line is I to a student, I can't help you if you've only had 2 hours of sleep. That was my like sleep is such an essential to mental health. It's pretty essential to physical health as well. But young people, your brains are growing and developing till you're 25. And so having rest to be able to replace your cells and grow, it's just an essential part of mental health. And so that's, philosophically, that's true. But it was also true about what I was seeing in my office, especially after the rise of social media and cell phones, is that a lot of people were reporting with sleep issues. So I wanted to start with that because it's just so important for mental health to have decent sleep and figure it out. And I wish it was easy, but it's a challenge. So I try to put a lot of strategies and a lot of, different ways because people are so different. And so the first section has 6 chapters, and one of the chapters is quiet time.
Yeah.
And as a Jewish person, that does match up quite nicely to Shabbat.
Yeah.
And I am recommending to people to have a little quiet time every day if they can, something where they're not racing through their day. But because that was presented in my office a lot, that just people had no time to slow down and think and know where their head was at. So I just feel like that's just an essential thing. In the modern world, it might not have been such a big deal. Decades ago, people probably had plenty more downtime. They just don't have it now. So,
No, oh, for sure. I think you're able to build in downtime a little bit differently when you're not connected to everything and everyone all the time. And to go
yes.
back to what you're saying about sleep and the importance of it, sleep is chapter one. So
Yes.
it's not just that your body is section one, or is section one. Sleep is the first thing you write about in this book.
Absolutely. It's and there are some young adults out there that get good sleep every night. They do exist. And so for them, they don't need to deep dive into that chapter. They're like, no, I get my 8 hours every night. I'm rested. I'm happy with my sleep schedule. That chapter they don't need. But I would say the majority of young people, a majority maybe, are struggling in some way with sleep. So I don't have that data in front of me, but I know that it's just been rising and it's a big thing. And yes, it comes first. You can't think straight if you haven't slept. So
And I think that goes for adults too.
it
Speaking
does.
from a little bit of experience,
Yes.
it's hard.
It's hard.
I mean, it's something that absolutely matters for adults as much as it does for kids and adolescents. Obviously, from a brain development standpoint, it's a little bit different, but the need for sleep and rest and quiet time absolutely.
So important. That's kind of one of the reasons, another reason for the book is to have, when students see, oh, she's got sleep first, and it's actually the longest chapter in the book. This must be important. I'm hoping that just having that validation that, yeah, this is important, and it does seem to be hard for a lot of students can help a lot of times, if you're 18 or 19, you don't know that everybody else is struggling with it. You think you're the only one, or maybe your, caregiver has said, you got to get the right sleep, and then you kind of write them off. But hopefully seeing it in like, this is what this person thinks, like you got to sleep, and this is why I try to give a good reason for it. So hopefully that will validate and kind of encourage people to not write it off and prioritize it more.
No, absolutely. I mean, in having a good rationale helps because, I mean, unless it's your children reading this book, you're not the parent of all of these college students who are reading this. You're an I mean, you have your biases and that they all need to get more sleep, but like you're a neutral observer to their lives, right? You're
Mhm.
not. It's easy for it's easy for my kids to blow off me because
Right.
I'm their parent. What do I know? But like
That's
a
a
neutral third party
normal part.
expert, yes, that is a vital
Yeah.
part of growing up is to blow off your parents. But
Yes.
um, I would like them not to. But that's a different,
No, I know.
fully different conversation.
It's so they
So
can hear it from me.
that's great, great, really helpful. This will be the episode they choose to listen to.
Yes.
Um, so what was it that led you to write this book at this stage in your life and career that you decided this was the time to take this on?
Well, I actually started writing it in 2007, because even then I was seeing we were starting to have wait lists, and that was becoming true across the country that there was this rise in mental health issues, which now is just a huge tsunami. But so I wanted to try to make sense of what I was seeing in my office. What were the themes that people were bringing in over and over, and make it into a form that was easily digestible for people, that was like not, I mean, the internet wasn't that good in 2007, but like, so you wouldn't have to go run out and get 35 different books or click all over the internet and God knows what you'd find. But to have sort of a nice, all-encompassing but brief, sort of like an introduction to all the most common issues. I wanted to see that. That's the book that I didn't see, that I didn't have. So I kind of
Right.
wrote the book that I wanted, that I wished I'd had in my job, because it would have made things a lot easier for me as a therapist, and also knowing that so many people are working on this and not everyone can get into a counseling session that easily at college because it's
Yeah.
pretty busy. Wouldn't it be nice if there's another resource so that people can sort of at least get like a mental health 101 situation all in one place in a book that they can, you don't have to read it cover to cover. You can just go to the chapter that you're worried about or that you need, and then you can have it as a resource when you need other information. So,
What you mentioned the mental health shortage and the weights and the challenges that students can have to accessing that. And I agree, it's something I've been hearing about for a long time as well. What is it that you think led to that? I mean, you had a firsthand look being on the ground, so you sort of saw it in real time. But what do you think that was that ticked that off?
well, I think it's the years will go by and people will understand it better and better. But a few things started happening. One is I do think our world has gotten more complex and more sped up, with all the connectedness on our social media. So there's just more input all the time. And having a safe person to go, who is safe because they're a counselor and they have to keep your confidentiality, that started to look pretty good to people who were hurting for whatever reason. Like, I need this. I can't just go to my friends or my family. Like, I need another person to help me with all this stuff that's causing me great distress. I mean, there's many reasons, like our society, is, I don't, our society's broken down a bit. It's hard to find people that you can really trust with your problems, where you feel safe to talk to them. I think a recent study showed that people want to talk to their peers, but they're not sure their peers will know what to do. They don't want to burden their parents, or they're afraid their parents will overreact and freak out. Um, so who's that intermediary person that you can go to and have a 50-minute conversation that's all focused on you, and it's quiet, and that person, the counselor is just seeing you and being present for you. I think that's what people need. And the amount of actual diagnosable mental illness, that's important. That was important. But to me, it felt it sort of felt like it was more of a like a special relationship that people were so hungry for, connecting in that way. And I think that's on the rise it's still.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have thought we'd have hit a tipping point, but unfortunately, it seems like it's the tipping point appears to probably be several years away still.
Right. There's some good news I heard on just on the radio today that they want to try to start teaching more mental health skills K through 12 here in Minnesota. So I think legislators and educators know we can't just send the kid to the counseling center because it's all the kids.
Right.
There will
It's
never
all the
be
kid.
enough
Yeah.
counselors. So I hope my book can be a part of that where like, hey, there's a lot of the skills that really don't have to be owned by the counseling center. They can be out in other places and hopefully so that it's not just like so that it's more across our whole society. So sort of like health, we all talk about how are you feeling, how's your health? We want to do that and spread that out to mental health as well.
So I know that college student is in the title of the book, but is there sort of like a slightly pre-college age at which some of this is applicable and digestible?
I absolutely think there is. I mean, for me, I only worked with college students. So
Fair.
for me, I feel like my qualification is for that. But there's almost the whole book would absolutely be great for juniors and seniors in high school. And I've had many adults come up to me and said, Mia, I'm learning so much from this book. You need to write a version for retirees. And I'm like, I'm not qualified for that. So you're just gonna have to read my book for college students. So there's a lot of just like general life information. It is geared toward college, but many high school juniors and seniors, maybe that aren't even going to go to college, they're still going to go and have to figure all this stuff out, basically not the study schedule, but all the rest of it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, also you're right. You're not only are you not qualified to do a book on how to be a mental health guide for retirees. By the time you are qualified as a retiree, are you going to really want to do the work to write the book? Like that's the point of being retired.
Yes, exactly.
That's so you mentioned that it was written over the period of 15 years, and I've never embarked on writing a book, nor I mean, I'm never going to say never, but I don't really have any intention to embark on writing a book. Why? I've talked to people with whom books come out way quicker. I've talked to people for whom it's taken anywhere from like 6 months to several years. 15 years feels to me, total novice on this topic to be really, really long.
I agree.
Why do you think it took that as much time?
Well, I'll say two things. There's sitting and writing the words of the book, and then there's the thought process of what are the topics, how is each chapter outlined, and just thinking through and kind of living my life as a therapist, what are these topics that I know need to be in the book? That took a long, it looks so easy in hindsight,
Well,
but
sure,
thinking
of course it
through
does.
and then what order the book should be in. Does it start with identity or does it start with, your body or your time? I mean, it just took a lot of thinking time as well.
Absolutely.
And I was working full time and raising my two sons. And for me, luckily, my job was 9 months a year. So I had summers off and I could do more writing and thinking. But like it just took a long time to get to where, oh, I know what the book is now and I can fill in the chapters the way they need to be filled in. So yeah, it just took a long time to think it through. And I feel like I needed the experience that I was having as a therapist. I couldn't do it as a young therapist. I had to do it as a more seasoned professional.
Sure.
I had to have all the years under my belt. So it just took a long time.
Right. And I think if you're going to write a book like this specifically geared to the, again, at least entitled primarily though, the demographic you're writing for, you need to have a certain amount of time under your belt working with that demographic to be able to do it. You're not going to do it fresh out of school. You don't have any experience to
Right,
tell those stories.
right. And that has been something that's really gratifying for me, seeing when a young people a couple times have had young people say, "Oh my God, that quote, we were just talking about that the other day." Like picking out the examples. Each chapter starts with five short quotes from students, and then kind of at the end, there's sort of longer sidebar little stories from students, and they're really relatable. And like you can't have that overnight. You have to have
Yep.
years of experience to pull all those examples. So, and the students I've talked with about it have just loved that. So that's very nice. They can
No,
see themselves.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything sort of through the writing editing process, and at least thinking about the structure and the way you ended up with, were there any areas, either parts or chapters within a part, that ended up on the cutting room floor that you just couldn't figure out a way to logically make work?
I do have a sort of poorly written chapter on surviving a pandemic. So, I mean, I kind of made it fit with the chapter style, but it was just decided that we're all praying we don't have to go through that again.
Seriously, and if we don't, it feels like it's something that dates the book, maybe
Hmm.
unnecessarily.
Right. Right. And if it happens, I'll finish off the chapter and I'll put it up on my website for free and
Yeah,
just here's my tips that I
right.
learned working through it with college students and how to structure your day and how to figure things out the best I could do. I have those strategies in there. So
Well, that's great. And it's again, let's hope, knock on wood, knock
yeah,
on all the wood. It's nothing
exactly.
we're gonna have to deal with again,
Right, right.
because it was not all that much fun the first time around.
Mhm. No.
So before we get to our sort of standard wrap up questions, is there any advice that you would maybe give to either students or their parents who might be listening, particularly as we're getting into summer, the college year is ending, and also address, as a way to help address some of the shortages that are happening and the inability for students to get appointments with counselors on campus? How would is there any advice or you could give them to help navigate that?
Sure. There's sort of two questions in there. One is the question of overall advice, which is for students and families to keep trying and not think that they're stuck in one place, that oh, this can't be recovered from. There's so many different strategies. Just try for any different issue, and to keep knowing that it's worth trying and keep looking around. And a lot of times it takes trial and error to find the right thing that works for your individual student or yourself. And so, and also honoring that baby steps matter. And a lot of times it's like little things add up when you keep trying them. So kind of keep that faith and that hope alive. And the other is with, it really depends on the school that before you're in a crisis, to know where the counseling center is and walk over there, see how you make an appointment. A lot of appointments can be made online now, and just know about your resources before you go. And if it seems like, yeah, my college has minimal resources and you do need counseling, a lot of counselors will do video counseling with you, or some kind of long distance counseling if you have a counselor from home. And there's a lot of good telehealth resources now too, and the college may offer those as well. So it's like taking care of yourself as best you can, and also knowing that counseling is there in a variety of forms at this point in history. The college counseling center may be plenty qualified to take you on, or they may not have enough staff. It depends on the college. So both are true.
Yeah, and it's always hard to know, like, when are you in that crisis? Sometimes you don't know when it's coming on, but once you're there. You don't want to be in a situation where it's too late to, or you feel like it's too late to go
Yeah.
get
It's
help.
never
And
it's never too late ever. And B, it's just like physical health. Like, you may have a sniffle or a sore throat or something, and you're getting through the week, and then all of a sudden you're like, I have 105 fever or whatever, and I'm super sick. You will have wished that you knew where the health center was before that. Same as mental health stuff. You want to know, what are my resources, kind of get to know them before you have that fever, before something feels hard. So it's just really, it's a hard thing to embrace going off to college, but to kind of know what's out there is a great thing to do.
Absolutely. Well, Mia, last couple questions and we will let you get on with your day. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Hmm. I love um Sukkot
How come?
because I like eating outside and
Listen,
hard, but
perfectly acceptable reason.
it's just a pretty time of year.
No, absolutely. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Hmm.
Doesn't have to be one you can eat outside. It can be one you can eat anywhere.
It's got to be chicken soup.
Okay. Any ones in
I,
particular?
pardon?
Anyone's chicken soup in particular?
I was gonna say my granny Esther taught me to make it.
Oh,
She literally said, first you wash the chicken 6 times.
6 times.
She was
Wow.
she was rightfully worried about all the the stuff they were injecting into chickens to keep them healthier. She knew it wasn't good. This we're talking in the 60s and 70s, in the
Oh,
70s.
yeah.
Before now we have organic chickens, but she knew what was happening wasn't right. So just like try to wash that stuff out. I know that wasn't logical, but
No, but you got there. That's cool. I mean, listen, and now I'm sure now it's just a superstition that you got to continue with, right?
I do kind of think of her.
I'm sure. I totally understand that. Mia Nosanow, thank you so much for joining me. This has been terrific. The College Student's Guide to Mental Health, Essential Wellness Strategies for Flourishing in College are available pretty much wherever you buy books, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, bookshop.org. And we will have a link to your website where people can check out upcoming events where you might be speaking at. And thank you so much for joining me. This has been a blast.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to talk with you.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.